The Oklahoma Sooners added a tight end via the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'm John Williams. My buddy Jay Smith's on vacation with his family, so he is not with us today, but he will be back on the show for tomorrow's episode and the rest of this week. It's the holiday season, it's Christmas time, the schedule's a little bit off, but we're going to bring you all the great and latest news from Oklahoma Sooners football and more. The Sooners added a tight end in the transfer portal, one Carson Kent from Kennesaw State. Now, we're looking at Kennesaw State, one of the worst offenses in college football last year. It's a team that made the jump from the FCS to the FBS level in 2024, and things did not go swimmingly for them. However, Carson Kent, third on the team in receiving yards. No player on that team had more than 300 yards receiving, okay? He led the team in receiving touchdowns, so that just kind of goes to show just kind of what kind of a team they had. It was not a team that threw the ball very much. They averaged just 24 passing attempts on the season. Their quarterbacks completed just 52% of their passes. So there's only an average of 13 completions to go around this season. They ran the ball a lot more, 37 rushing attempts. So this was a team that was trying to be more run heavy than pass heavy in 2024. But again, Carson Kent, 217 receiving yards on 18 touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns, averaged 12.1 yards per reception. Not eye-popping numbers, but let's just talk about what the player can do. I think he's got a little bit plus athleticism. Is he a great athlete? It's hard to say that, but he's somebody that can win out in space. He has decent route running. He does a really good job on the scheme that asks him to block and then slip out into the formation. Does a really good job selling that. As a blocker, he does a really nice job in the seal game. Isn't somebody that appears to be overpowering, but he's a physical player. Even after the catch, he's looking to hit somebody. He's not necessarily looking to get around somebody. He's trying to go through people. So he brings a physicality to the position that Oklahoma needs to get more physical up front, right? Whether it's in the run game, in the receiving game, they need to just simply be more physical. They need to be more productive, more active. He's a guy that's got some experience. He's got over 800 snaps at the collegiate level, 500 snaps plus in 2024 for the Owls. So a little bit of experience, brings some physicality. I think he's a good receiver. Is he somebody that is going to be able to win at the SEC level? That remains to be seen, but he looks like he's got enough tools in the bag to be able to be productive. And like we've had this discussion with Bauer Sharp, if you're bringing a guy like Carson Kent in to be your number one option in the passing attack, you're already setting yourself up for not very much success. You're setting yourself up for disappointment, similar to what Bauer Sharp was in 2024. If you're setting yourself up where Bauer Sharp is the number one option in the passing game, you weren't going to be happy with the results. But if he's your fourth or your fifth option in the passing game, then you probably feel a little bit better about what you're going to be getting out of the tight end position. But I think Carson Kent is an interesting piece to add. Am I going to sit here and compare him to the second coming of Mark Andrews or Jermaine Gresham? No, I'm not. But I think he's somebody that does have some things and has some tools in the bag that are going to be able to help Oklahoma offensively. Now let's talk about what this means for the tight end room in particular, because you add a guy with some experience to your group that has some talent. It's just unrealized talent, right? Kaden Helms, a 4-star prospect that came in as part of the 2022 recruiting class. Kade McIntyre that came in as the 2023 recruiting class tight end as a 3-star prospect. And then Davon Mitchell, who came in the 2024 recruiting class, a 4-star prospect, was probably going to be one of the higher rated tight ends in the 2025 class before he reclassified. So he's a young dude. You've got some talent to work with at tight end. You just don't have a lot of experience. Carson Kent brings the experience, but he's not a guy that's going to keep you from playing one of these other guys if they are the better option. And if you can develop Kaden Helms or Kade McIntyre or Davon Mitchell this offseason and they take a job and they become your starter at tight end, is anybody going to be mad about that? No. But you do have a little bit of veteran insurance in a guy like Carson Kent who can win for you a little bit on offense. But your hope is that one of your highly regarded 4-star prospects or a guy like Kade McIntyre, who's got really good athleticism, is able to go and take the job and become your starter at tight end. Because if everybody is right about Kaden Helms or right about Davon Mitchell, then those two guys should be able to be starters for you at some point. They should be able to be impactful players in your offense at some point, especially a guy like Davon Mitchell, who is, again, was one of the more highly regarded tight ends in the 2025 cycle before he reclassified, but even still was very highly regarded in the 2024 class. If he is everything that you expect him to be, he should really start to emerge in 2025. This offseason, he should start creating buzz that he's going to be a starter or at least your tight end too. Kaden Helms, the time is now for him. He's been in the program now. He's going on to his 4th season. Health and injuries have been an issue for him. But if you can get him through an offseason where he's healthy, can actually develop, he should be able to emerge at this point and take a role for you. And Kade McIntyre, when he's been on the field, he's been an impactful player. But you had 2 veteran options in Bauer Sharp and Jake Roberts this year that were more reliable options, I could say, either as a receiver or as a blocker. But now Kade McIntyre has been in your system. This will be his 3rd offseason in your system. Now's the time. These young guys, listen, you want to add impactful players in the transfer portal. 100%. I want that. If you're going to go get a guy that's a frontline guy that is ready to step in and be a starter for you right away. But Oklahoma's looking like they're taking a little bit different philosophy, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next segment, but they added a guy that is going to be able to compete for a role, compete for snaps, but isn't going to necessarily keep anybody off the field unless he's just that much better. So you have an opportunity to continue to develop your tight end room that has to be more impactful, has to be better in the blocking game. Because Bauer Sharp was just up and down this year. There were moments where, man, he looked really good and he was going to be an impactful receiver for you and he was going to make plays in the passing game. And then there were moments where the blocking just wasn't good enough. But then he started to develop as a blocker and got a little bit better over the course of the season. But still, you're relying on him to do way too much in your offense. So the tight end game has to improve. But hopefully, a new scheme, a new offensive coordinator, a group of receivers that can take a little bit of the pressure off of that tight end room, and perhaps you see them start to develop. Because it has to be better. Simply has to be better. Is there a tight end out there that you can go get that makes your group instantly better? I think those guys might still be playing, and there might not be a lot of those guys in the transfer portal to begin with. But you've got 2 guys in Kaden Helms and Davon Mitchell, who again were 4-star prospects coming out that everybody liked. And so now it's time for the coaching staff to do its job and develop those guys. Braden Willis, he'll go to bat for Joe John Finley. I know Joe John Finley's not the most popular assistant right now in Sooners circles, and I get why. At the same time, Braden Willis believes in Joe John Finley, and that's the dude that had a breakout season with Finley as his assistant. So let's maybe give Davon Mitchell, let's give Kaden Helms, let's give Kade McIntyre some time to develop. And if they can take a step this offseason and become a starter, one of those 3 guys can become a starter for you this next year, that'll be huge for Oklahoma. But again, if not, Carson Kent, you've got someone that you can work with that's got some veteran experience and can take some significant snaps for you. What else does Oklahoma need, though, in the transfer portal? How much further do they need to come to be a playoff team? We'll discuss those things coming up here on Locked On Sooners. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, that's happened to me. I had a VPN subscription from my time living overseas that I completely forgot about, but Rocket Money helped me find that and get it shut down so I don't have to pay for it every single year. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even your goals you want to hit each and every year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Again, that subscription tracker was absolutely huge. We've used it to cancel services that we weren't using anymore, and it has helped us save a ton. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Jay will be back on the show on Tuesday, spending some family time up in the Big Apple. So enjoying some of that time. So can't wait to hear about his trip. But the Oklahoma Sooners have had a very interesting portal season. Okay. You look at the departures and the 17 guys that have found new homes so far this offseason. 16 of those have landed at Power 4 schools. 10 of those 17 guys have landed at Big Ten or SEC schools. So you're seeing the talent from Oklahoma get redistributed to Power 4 programs. The only one that didn't end up at a Power 4 program, that's Jaquays Petaway. And he went to East Carolina, an interesting landing spot for him, for the former top 100 prospect. But you look at what Oklahoma's added, and they're taking a very different approach. They have not been attacking the transfer portal in a way that I think most of us expected or even wanted them to. You got John Mateer, and that was the big fish, right? That was the one that you had to have this offseason, right? You had to have a veteran quarterback, or at least you felt like you had to have a veteran quarterback to help usher in the Ben Arbuckle era. Ben Arbuckle is really high on Michael Hawkins and what he brings to the table and is excited to work with and help him develop. But you needed a veteran quarterback to solidify the room, to solidify the quarterback room. And you've got that in Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer. But everywhere else, Oklahoma is kind of reaching down past the Power 4 for players. You had the Luke Baklenko addition from Stanford at offensive tackle. And then everywhere else, you're going to the FCS level or the group of 5, which is a little bit surprising. It's a different approach. Again, Oklahoma's trying to kind of play a little bit of money ball, I think, and hoping that they can find some diamonds in the rough out there. But the other one, Isaiah Satania, you got from Arkansas. That's the other kind of big Power 4 addition that you've made in the transfer portal. But otherwise, looking at it, you've added Carson Kent. As a transfer, he was considered a 3-star prospect. He was unrated coming out of high school. You added Derek Simmons from Western Carolina, Keontae Lewis from Keontae Lewis was Southern Illinois, and Giovanni Gibson was Arkansas Pine Bluff. Excuse me, forgive me for that. And then Jacob Ulrich from Kennesaw State. So you're not really going to the Power 4 well to add guys this offseason, whereas a lot of other programs are doing that, adding Oklahoma Sooners for their Power 4 programs. It's an interesting approach. Again, I think they're looking to see if they can find some guys that have been productive at the level that they were at and want to continue to prove themselves, right? It's like trading for a AAA player or a AA player in baseball. Like, you see the production at the AA level, you see the tools that they've got, and you're offloading veteran pieces and you're trying to bring in some prospects that you think can help you, are going to be able to help the big club. Now, the difference being, when you're trading for AA prospects, single A prospects, you're usually putting them back into your minor league system and then continuing to develop them. Well, you don't really have that luxury at the college football level. You have to get those guys in your system, develop them right away, and they've got to become impactful players for you. The other thing that they're doing and we kind of touched on it in the first segment. The other thing that they're doing is they're adding guys that aren't going to be progress stoppers. They're adding guys that are going to add competitive depth, but aren't going to keep you from developing the guys that you've got in-house. They're not going to preclude guys like Zion Kearney or Zion Reagans or Ivan Ketterion at wide receiver from developing, or a guy like Elijah Thomas out of Chakotah from coming in and taking a job right away as a freshman. At offensive line, you're adding Luke Baklenko and Derek Simmons, guys you maybe think are going to start, but what if Jacob Sexton, Jake Taylor emerge and stay healthy, or Logan Howland continues his development and becomes a starter for you? Okay, that's better, but you're getting competition everywhere. And John Mateer is the one guy that I think everybody expects is going to be a starter that they've added in the transfer portal, or Jacob Ulrich, the punter from Kennesaw State. You probably expect to come in here and be a starter for you because he's got so much experience. But everywhere else, you're kind of just adding guys and hoping that the competitive depth that you have on offense is going to create this high tides raise all ships sort of a thing where, iron sharpens iron, and they are going to build off of that competition and create a situation where somebody goes out there and earns a job. We'll see. And we'll see if the Ben Arbuckle edition and the John Mateer editions are going to be enough for Oklahoma to be able to take all this talent that they've gotten from the lower levels and build on. But we'll see. But I mean, you add guys like Keontez Lewis and Giovanni Gibson who have been productive at the FCS level. You're adding dudes that have a little bit of an edge to them and some competitiveness to them, and they're wanting to come in and compete for a role. And I'm all for that. But what else does Oklahoma need? It's hard to look at any one specific position and say, you gotta add that. You gotta add that. You gotta, maybe cornerback still is one spot where you're like, okay, maybe adding a veteran is going to be important for Oklahoma. But you like Eli Bowen, you like Gentry Williams. And if those two guys, and you like Jacoby Johnson, if those three guys are back and they continue to develop, Gentry stays healthy, then you feel good about the position with those three guys. Eli Bowen, even for some of the ways he got beat this year, he showed that you've got someone that you can build your cornerback room around. Gentry Williams has shown you enough when he's been able to stay healthy that you feel good about where he's at. Jacoby Johnson, the tools are there. He just needs to continue to develop and get experience. And he's going to get better and better. Safety, I think you feel good about it, especially if Robert Spears-Jennings comes back. Then you got Robert Spears-Jennings and Peyton Bowen and Reggie Powers and Michael Boganowski and Jaden Hardy. That's a really good group of 5 guys that you can build your safety room around. You bring Kendall Dolby back into the mix at Cheetah. You feel good about it. Linebacker, you feel really good about. Maybe you want to add a veteran option, but maybe not, because you've got a lot of guys on the depth chart at linebacker that you feel really, really good about. Kobe McKenzie has gotten better the more he's played. Kip Lewis has gotten better the more that he's played. Samuel Omasigo, Lewis Carter, same thing. Jaron Kanik is kind of the longest tenured guy in the linebacker room now, and he's going to be a leader for that group. But I think he's still going to be a rotational player, but still has a lot of athleticism and speed that can do a lot of good things for you at linebacker and on special teams. So I think he's still an important piece there. If there's a linebacker from a team that's still competing in the playoff that you think, hey, we got to get that guy, we got to add him to our squad, then okay. But I feel decent at linebacker, defensive line. A lot's going to depend on what happens with Dominic Williams. But otherwise, at defensive tackle, you're looking at Jaden Jackson and David Stone and Grayson Halton as a nice little trio to build around. And then you can go into the portal and try and find a guy at defensive tackle if you don't think Dominic Williams is coming back. And then you can continue to develop Marcus Strong and Trent Wilson. And I think that's a really solid group there. And actually, it's a really good group, not just solid, really good, because we saw what Jaden Jackson's capable of. We saw Grayson Halton's emergence this year to 5 sacks. David Stone, we know the player that he can be. Just got to continue to develop. And then at edge, if R. Mason Thomas is back, love where we're at. Doesn't matter what else we got. You got to find somebody to replace Ethan Downs. And Oklahoma's pursuing edge prospects in the transfer portal. Whether they can be Ethan Downs or not, we'll see. But if you've got R. Mason Thomas, you got Adepoju Adebaware and Danny Okoye and Nigel Smith, that's a young group, but it gives you something to start from. It gives you a building block, right? Alexander Shieldknight, another guy that can be impactful for you at defensive end. Offensively, I mean, again, unless you can find a guy that is a legit number one wide receiver, kind of like what we saw from Jeremiah Smith. If you're going to find that guy in the transfer portal, okay. If you see a guy that is just head and shoulders above anybody that you've got on offense, then you could bring him in, but don't just add guys that are going to be depth pieces just to add guys. Let your competition play out and let's see who's going to emerge and become a starter, because you've got a long way to go on offense. You've made some moves this offseason that are going to hopefully make you better offensively, but you've got to see what you've got in-house. You've got to see what you've got in your 4-star wide receivers, Ivan Carrion and Zion Reagans and Zion Kearney and Elijah Thomas. You got to see what you've got in your offensive line group that's got some nice young pieces on the depth chart. You've got to see what you've got at running back, because running back is looking really good with Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum. And if Javonte Barnes is back, and if Gavin Sawchuk is back next year, you got to feel good about where you're going, especially with a guy like Torrey Blaylock coming in as well. So there's not a lot of like no-brainer places that you have to add a guy anymore. Oklahoma's kind of filled its needs, quote unquote. But again, if there's a guy that's head and shoulders above somebody that you've got on the depth chart on the roster right now, then that's pretty much all you've got to do. Maybe go add another edge rusher, because as we saw with South Carolina, as we saw this past weekend with Ohio State, having a dynamic duo that can rush the passer pretty much at will, man, that makes a big, big difference. But how far is Oklahoma from being a playoff team? We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. We love betting on the players that will score a touchdown or how many points a team will score. It's thrilling. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Oklahoma Sooners, I think, are still a long ways off from being a playoff team. And the reason I say that is because, one, the SEC grind is going to be tricky. We saw with the committee selections that 3 losses, even if they're 3 SEC losses, may keep you out of the playoff. And I was pretty adamant that if Oklahoma went 9-3 in 2024 and those 3 losses were in SEC play, that I still thought that they could be a playoff team. Well, the committee showed us that with Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, that 3 losses there's a really good chance that 3 losses keeps you out of the playoff. I don't care what happened to SMU. I don't care what happened to Indiana. 3 losses, there's a good chance it keeps you out of the playoff. So you got to get to 10-2 if you want to be a playoff team. Now, the Oklahoma Sooners defense showed us in 2024 that they're really good. They're a really good defense. They're not an elite defense yet. They're not a defense that week to week is showing that they can play 60 minutes of elite defensive football and absolutely win you football games, a la Baltimore Ravens, early 2001, a la the Alabama defenses under Nick Saban, or the Georgia defense under Kirby Smart. They still need some pieces to come together, especially as I just finished the last segment on. You need that second edge rusher to complement R. Mason Thomas, a guy that can get after the passer with as much proclivity as R. Mason Thomas can. Run defense, they're really good. The pass defense has to continue to develop. Now, they're really young at cornerback last year. That group's got to get better. They got to continue to get better, and they got to continue to develop, because you can't have games like LSU where the guy just beats you and you can't play, 1 high safety or 0, cover 0 in the secondary and just rely on your young corners to win. That's going to get you beat in the SEC. But really the big issue is offensively. Oklahoma's a long ways from where they need to be offensively based on what we saw in 2024. Now, there's been a complete overhaul of the offensive unit. Your wide receivers are gone. Your top 7 wide receivers all gone, or top 8, even if you want to say. I guess 6 of your top 8. Jaden Gibson's back. Deion Burks is back. You've got a new quarterback. You got a new offensive coordinator. You've got to continue to develop your offensive line. You cannot have a pass pro year like you had in 2024. If you hope to be a playoff team in 2025, you've got to have a much, much better offensive line. Can't take half the season to get the run game going. It can't be a unit that pass protects as poorly as they did in 2024. I think the quarterback situation is going to be better. I think the offensive coordinator situation is going to be better. Ben Arbuckle, he does a lot to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly, and is a good coach and good teacher of the offense. Obviously, John Mateer brings experience to the table that I think is going to help benefit Oklahoma's offense, especially as it develops and learns what Ben Arbuckle wants to do. And if they just have just a better schematic function for their wide receivers, where they can actually scheme them open from time to time and create some easy passes and catches, that's going to go a long way to opening everything up for the offense. It just seemed in 2024, everything was just too complicated, and there was nothing simple in the offense for the quarterback to do. You watch the Texas Longhorns this week, you watch the Ohio State Buckeyes, and one, they got the Jimmies and the Joes that make the X's and O's work really, really well. But two, Steve Sarkisian was just scheming things up for that offense to do simply. Quinn Ewers on a bubble, Quinn Ewers on a flare out, Quinn Ewers on a simple 10-yard, 8-yard comeback. Like, there was not a lot of complicated stuff out there. It was just, you have a veteran quarterback that's got a lot of experience just executing. And then when they wanted to take some shots, they did. At Ohio State, a lot of the same. I mean, Will Howard had a very, very efficient game, but he took some shots and was willing to trust his wide receivers to go win a one-on-one. And they did. And some of it just comes back to what Jay talks about all the time, is you just got to have a quarterback that's willing to sling it. And at a lot of times this year, Jackson Arnold was just not willing to sling it. And I think Michael Hawkins has that ability to be a gunslinger and just throw the ball and give his wide receivers an opportunity and a chance to make a play. He just was lacking experience this year. But he'll develop and he'll continue to grow. So, I mean, I think Oklahoma is kind of far from being a playoff team right now. They can still surprise me. I'm still in, I got to see it to believe it mode for 2025. If they come out of the gates and they start things off, obviously the non-conference schedule is not going to tell us what Oklahoma is, but if they come out in SEC play and they show that this is a team that's ready to be a contender and say they win a couple SEC games and they beat Texas, then I'll start to believe. But they got a lot to prove in 2025 for this to be a team that can be taken seriously as a potential playoff contender. I think for the most part, you're going to look at most preseason projections and they'll probably fall in the 5-7 to 7-5 range as a program. But I think the offense is going to be much better in 2025. Can't really be much worse than what it was. And if it's much better, or even if it's average and your defense stays where they're at, or even improves a little bit, then you have a shot. But those are big ifs, right? Because even on the defensive side of the ball, even though you like the direction of the defense, you're still losing Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman, two very key pieces to Oklahoma's defensive development over the last few years. And as much as I love Kobe McKenzie and I love Kip Lewis and Lewis Carter and Samuel Masigo and Jaron Kanik, those are big shoes to fill with Danny Stutzman's departure. And so, as optimistic as I like to be and as optimistic as I want to be about the direction of Oklahoma football, offensively, I need to see it. I got to see a team that's able to get out there and put up 35 points on a regular basis, even against the SEC. I need to see a team or 30 points on a regular basis against the SEC, because this was a team in 2024 that only scored 30 points against non-conference opponents, Temple and Tulane and Maine. That was it. They had 3 games where they scored 30 points. That's not going to be good enough. And you can't rely on the defense to score for you, because Oklahoma got some defensive scores against Auburn. Otherwise, the offense only gave them 20 points. They got a defensive score against Alabama. The offense only gave them 17 points. They got a defensive score against Missouri. The offense only gave them 16 points. So the offense is going to have to be much, much better for me to believe that the Oklahoma Sooners can be a playoff contender in 2025 or even 2026. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow the show at Locked On Sooners on all your social media platforms, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. Follow me at John9Williams. And you can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. But until next time, we're going to talk about an edge prospect that Oklahoma is pursuing in the transfer portal. And we'll have more for you all week long here on Locked On Sooners. Hope you're excited and getting ready for the Christmas season and time with friends and family. But until next time, I'm John Williams for Jay Smith, Boomer Sooner.